I don't know if Francis Ford Coppola really wrote the dialogue to this movie or if he typed a script prompt into ChatGPT.
Bing bong!
Well, I saw Megalopolis, and it's something. I saw Megalopolis yesterday, and I had to sleep on it to really process what this movie is, because right off the bat I want to say it's extremely ambitious. Essentially, this movie is one very ambitious creator who wants to build a new city, and a current mayor of that city who wants to keep it the way that it is and thinks that everybody's happy and there's no need to innovate. I think that Francis Ford he's doing a lot in this movie, which makes sense because he wrote it, directed it, produced it, put $100 million of his own money to finance the entire movie. I think some of it kind of works and some of it is a total train wreck disaster, but in a way that is very hard to not keep watching. I do want to say the acting in this movie is mostly really good. There's an interesting cast of people who I guess some would say were canceled, even though here they are in a $100 million big budget Hollywood movie, and a lot of people who Francis said he disagreed with politically or morally or whatever. He put them all in this movie because he thought it would be a fun little experiment. I don't know, some of it works. Adam Driver's really good. Giancarlo Esposito is really good, but this movie is like a weird, fantastical, kind of magical sci-fi fable type of movie. If you had paid attention to a lot of the media surrounding this movie, and maybe you're one of those people that was gonna go see it to like stick it to Hollywood and whatnot, I don't really know if you're going to enjoy this one. This is just a very, I think, maybe high concept movie, or it's like a total disaster. And like, if you go look at a lot of the reviews on like Rotten Tomatoes, it's people either saying 5 out of 5, this is the best movie I've ever seen, or people saying like, this is one of the worst movies ever made. Did Francis Ford Coppola lose a bet that he had to make like the worst movie of all time? Let's start with the positives, right? The things that I liked. I almost felt like this movie wasn't long enough. There was so much going on. There's so many threads and plot lines and characters and character development going on in this movie that the 2-hour, 20-minute runtime, I'm not gonna lie, if you finance the whole movie yourself, realistically, you could have made it as long as you wanted. I don't know if there's a longer cut of this movie. I think this should have been at least 3 hours, which I can't believe I'm saying because I generally hate movies that go longer than 90 minutes. But this one, I don't know, there was so much happening and there was so much that I wanted to see. I almost felt it could have used more time, which to me is a compliment to the movie because like I felt like there wasn't enough. I would have been interested in seeing more of it. Adam Driver, also very captivating in this movie, as I mentioned. He really disappears into a lot of his roles, really throws his full weight into every role that he takes, at least in the movies that I've seen him in, and this is no different if you're an Adam Driver fan. And even if you're not an Adam Driver fan or you don't really, not familiar with his work, he's fantastic in this movie. Also, one of the weirdest subplots of this movie that may or may not involve a pop singer who has this image that she's a virgin, but then it comes out that that may or may not be true and she has to rebrand her entire career as a punk rock singer. Just a separate little side story that this movie goes into. The song that this character sings in the movie, fantastic. I think that a lot of the music in this film is kind of hit or miss. I think it sort of depends on how much you enjoy this like fantasy sort of style music, like it's all a dream sort of vibe, not like the Inception train horn kind of dream, but just sort of like a, I don't know, almost like a PBS cartoon never-ending story kind of vibe. And so while some of the music works, I think some of it doesn't really match this movie as well as I would have liked it to. But her song in this film is fantastic. I mean, she won an Oscar. It was really, really good. There's a lot of good music in this movie, and I think it speaks a lot to this film. There's a lot that works. I enjoyed the fantastical elements, but for better or for worse, I think even if you're one of those people who's really locked in throughout a movie, looking for all the little metaphors and everything that it's trying to say, and is it an analogy for this, an allegory for that. I think even the most high concept film watcher is going to be pretty confused watching this movie, because it is very much all over the place. More of a byproduct of Francis financing the whole thing and probably not taking any notes on his script, because it does seem like there are some areas of this film that could have used a little bit of revision. And I gotta say, I don't know if Francis Ford Coppola really wrote the dialogue to this movie, or if he typed a script prompt into ChatGPT and it spit all of the dialogue. There are lines in this movie that seem like they were written by AI, like it was a test of AI to see like how convincingly it could make a real movie. Some of the things the characters say, even in a fantasy movie, don't really make sense for people to say, or a way to speak, and the way that they speak is kind of trapped between modern day and like some Shakespearean old English type of vibe, which I know that you could argue this movie is going for that sort of theme, but to me it just makes it seem even messier. And I think on that note, terrible title for this movie, Megalopolis. At the very least, you should avoid a movie title that rhymes with flop, because when there were only a few people in the theater that I went to see this movie at, I don't think the marketing was very good for this film. I know it struggled to find a distributor. This feels like this is a movie that, if it was a little bit more tight, if it was just a little bit more cohesive, this is a Christmas release. This is a big Hollywood December movie that makes $100 bazillion, because I think you could market it similar to Oppenheimer, those kinds of vibes, like this is an epic, it's in IMAX, go see it in IMAX, 70 millimeter, all that stuff, all those buzzwords. It was released on September 27th, which is not, it's not a bad time for a movie to come out, but it's also not a time where it's like they have the most faith in your movie doing well, especially when they're launching it before October, which is, when all the scary movies start to come out and people just kind of drift towards those instead of Megalopolis, which is by no means a horror movie, and I don't think you could really argue otherwise. I've heard that there are people who walked out of this movie. I've read stories. A couple people left the screening that I was at. I don't think it was bad to that extent. I don't think this is the worst movie ever. I don't think it's the best movie ever. I think it's sort of fine. It's good sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to follow, or just seems like it's either intentionally hard to follow, or Francis himself had no idea where he was going with the story. I think that if you're looking for good visual effects, you kind of feel the 100 million being stretched as this character tries to build this beautiful utopia of a new city to, inspire all the civilians and whatnot. It's kind of hard to determine who the antagonist is. I think you could argue everybody in this movie is both the hero and the villain of the story, which that's interesting. There are a lot of interesting elements to this movie, but there's a lot going on here. Sometimes it's working, and sometimes it feels like it's being polarizing just for the sake of trying to be polarizing without really having any sort of actual end goal or end message in the film. I would encourage people to see this, especially if you've been following along with a lot of the discussion around Megalopolis. You kind of owe it to yourself at this point to watch the actual movie and form your own opinion over whether or not you like it, or you think it's any good, or you think it's the worst thing ever made. As much as this movie is all over the place, I enjoy when movies spark discussion, which I think this one will definitely do, for better or for worse. And I think that it's one of the more unique movies of the year. It definitely gave me those Beau is Afraid vibes of sort of like this movie where I don't know if I really liked it that much, but I'm definitely going to be thinking about it. It's definitely going to be on my list of movies that I should probably see a second time, just to really get the most out of what the movie is trying to do. You got to give it up to Francis Ford Coppola. I was very skeptical because he's old as fuck, and I think that some of these old directors, kind of need to take a step back and open the way for the newer generation, because they're a little out of touch. But I do respect a director who got to make his vision. He said this was 40 years in the making. I don't know if that's true, only because it has so many current day parallels. It seems like this would have been not as obvious to write 40 years ago, but whatever. Francis, if you're to being honest, and this is really 40 years in the making, then hey man, you did it. You got your movie made. It might have cost you $100 million because nobody else wanted to invest in it, but you know what? You did it your way. You made your movie. It came out the way you wanted it to come out. I do think you should check this out if you've been paying attention to this movie. If you're looking for a movie that's just going to make you think, this is a good one to go see. If you're looking for a movie that may or may not make you walk out halfway through, this is a good one to check out. I think it's important that we get movies like this that are all over the place. They're very ambitious. They fail. They succeed all throughout the entire runtime. And this was certainly one of the most unique movies that I've seen this year.